Hey guys, it's Josh Deserna the Vinyl Kid, and welcome to a review video. Except, it's not going to be really a review video, it's going to be more of a vinyl video. So lately I've noticed that a lot of my fellow vinyl YouTubers have been posting their top 10, or top 55, or top 40, or top whatever post-Beatle albums by John, Paul, George, and Ringo in their solo careers. I wanted to do the same thing, but the problem is I don't have all the solo albums by the Beatles. In fact, I don't even have all the Beatle albums yet, reissue or not. But I do have the whole discography of a different group. I have Simon & Garfunkel's full discography, including a Greatest Hits album and a live album. So, instead of doing post-Beatles, I'm gonna be showing you my discography of Simon & Garfunkel, least to greatest, by favoritism anyway. Now, disclaimer, not that they have ever put out bad material, because quite frankly, all of their albums are great. They've never really put out bad material. So let's get right to it. And these are studio albums, just so you know, not like their Tom and Jerry stuff. So number whatever. The first one I'm going to look at is Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme. I wouldn't say I find it unappealing, but it's just my least spin Simon & Garfunkel album. It's not one that I would specifically say, I'm going to spin Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme. It's a good album and all, but the order of the tracks, in all honesty, is really not as good as it could be. But the songs, of course, are amazing. This is one that had a lot of their bigger hits on it, and of course, I'm not really a big fan of the bigger Simon & Garfunkel hits, you know, like The Sound of Silence and Scarborough Fair. I like the songs, but there are other ones that are much better. So I'm just gonna put this over here on my keyboard where it's safe. Next one, this is a reissued copy of Simon & Garfunkel's Greatest Hits. Since I'm not a newbie to Simon & Garfunkel, I don't really have much of a reason to own this, except for the fact that I collected their albums. Again, it's mainly just big hits, you know, Bridge Over Troubled Water, and Mrs. Robinson, and The Sound of Silence, and Scarborough Fair, and pretty much all the songs that you know Simon & Garfunkel for, when I prefer their underrated stuff. I'll say, though, this album is amazing for those of you who are just getting into Simon & Garfunkel, who want to get to know them. This is ideal for that. Next one is Sounds of Silence. This is an original stereo pressing, I think. I'm not sure, but most likely it is. This used to be my favorite album of theirs until I heard another one, which will be coming up in a moment. Of course, it has The Sound of Silence on it. And this one has A Most Peculiar Man, which is my second favorite Simon & Garfunkel song of all time. So you gotta give it some credit because of that one song. But no Bob Dylan on here, but who cares? That's fine. It's a lot of original material, like Sound of Silence, and I think Leaves That Are Green is original material. But I do recommend getting this album. It's great either way. Next one is Bookends. I don't know if I would call it like an opera or anything. It's more of a story about growing up, like songs about growing up. Like, you know, you start out with Save the Life of My Child, and then you go into Old Friends at the very end of side A, which is, can you imagine us years from today sharing a park bench quietly? How terribly strange to be 70. It's sheer genius. It is a genius LP. I wouldn't say it's like Tommy, but who am I to compare Simon & Garfunkel to The Who? So the next one I'm not gonna show on the pile because I don't have it on vinyl anymore because it's on my wall. Bridge Over Troubled Water, if you can see it, is up there. Their last album they recorded together as a studio album. Of course, it's got their huge hit Bridge Over Troubled Water, and it won the 1971 Grammy for Best Album, or Album of the Year, I mean. Sorry. As you can tell, it's in rough condition, but the only reason I framed it was because it was the first album I ever bought with my own money. And it was $1.10, so don't judge. And plus, I was like 12 when I bought it. So back to the regular setup. The next one is one of the best live albums of all time. Of course, behind David Bowie's reality tour and all that. Simon & Garfunkel in Central Park. If you keep up with Behind the Grooves, you may have seen me review this one in Season 2. If you don't, it's fine. I highly recommend you go check that out, though. But anyway, this was a benefit concert. If you don't know what that means, a benefit concert is a free concert that, lo and behold, took place in Central Park in 1982. I think it was one of their first reunions since the breakup. One of their first. They had a lot of them, but they're not going to be reuniting anymore, as far as we know, because they don't get along, according to Paul. But you know, this, you gotta have this in your collection. You've just got to, because there are Simon and Garfunkel songs, and there are just solo Paul Simon songs. Like, you've got Kodachrome, and 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, and Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard. It's such a genius live album. Now here we go, the most anticipated moment of all. Number 1. Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. Their first LP of first pressing in mono. A lot of people say this is their weakest album, and that's fine, because everyone's got an opinion. I think this was their strongest album. In all honesty, there is not a single hit on here that a regular music fan would typically notice, unless you count Times They Are Changing, which is just a Bob Dylan cover. And then an early version of Sound of Silence, just acoustic. Of course, very badly received, and they broke up after this, and Sound of Silence came after, but it's a long story. Go check out the Behind the Grooves episode. It's completely genius. The harmonies are amazing, because, you know, first off, they're much younger at this point. They've just exited teenhood, I think, at this point. They're in their early 20s. And yeah, it's so genius. It's hard to find. This pressing and the album period is pretty hard to find, but I would highly recommend getting it in mono because it sounds great. So those are my Simon & Garfunkel albums. In my opinion, worst to best. Not necessarily worst because, you know, they've put out great material throughout their whole careers. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and hopefully I'll do a Fab 4 one as soon as I can, and as soon as I get all the records. This is Josh DeZern, the Vinyl Kid of Florida, signing out. Peace, man.